I entered a building one evening to attend an art opening, an exhibit of works by various artists, contemporary artists living and working in the Indianapolis area. This was around 2003. The exhibit was in a building that used to be an assisted care home. This is one of the things I love about the arts. These little art places pop up everywhere: old warehouses, church buildings, old assisted care homes. It had a large area where paintings covered the walls. My companion and I looked at the artwork, then entered a hall and turned left. There were installations in various rooms all the way down the hall. We walked into one room, and above us, there were countless doll heads hanging from the ceiling. No bodies, just the heads. The furnace would kick on and the heads would start moving. It was quite chilling. The artist stood in the corner of that room near a closed bifold door. Waving to the heads above, Jenny said, "What do you think?" I said, "Wow, quite a powerful display of heads." The artist excitedly said, "Yeah, wait until you see this." She went to the bifold doors, pulled the door open, and there was a clear plexiglass against the closet. And on the other side of the clear plexiglass were all the doll bodies that used to be attached to the swinging heads. They were stacked one on top of the other. The pile was nearly my size, about 5 feet high. Rather unsettled, to say the least, I stepped back. Gathering my composure, I said, "Jenny, tell me about your installation." The artist took a deep breath and said, "It's very much about me. I am a lesbian. I know that God doesn't love my way of life, that I'm attracted to women, that I date women. I know it's a sin. That's what he said. But I'm hoping that God forgives me anyway." Wow. The idea that God or the Creator birthed great diversity in the animal, that is the non-human species, and within the world of plant species, and then chose not to do so in the human variety has never settled well with me. I mean, why make a world filled with multiplicity, then stop when it comes to humanity? Add to that the absurd idea that a creator would form a human being, then condemn the human being for being beautifully constructed, and then expect that individual to roam the earth disconnected from their natural yearnings. That just seems absurd to me. Sexuality is a whole head, body, and heart experience. We know this as a fact because it is based on science. One of the sources we Unitarian Universalists draw upon is humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against the idolatries of the mind and spirit. What is an idolatry of the mind and spirit? Well, one example of idolatry would be a faith or religious tradition that expects people to rock around without their whole embodied selves. That is, with head, heart, and body disconnected. We believe humanity should walk around the earth connected, heart, body, and mind. So here's the thing about discussing sex and sexuality. What is natural for one person is not for another. We recognize diversity of love and attraction, and yet I must pause for a moment and address one concept that is critical. That is the concept of consent. When I was in seminary, it was a Disciples of Christ institution where Dr. Frank Birch Brown was a professor. He was the chair of the program for Church and the Arts and editor of the worldwide respected Oxford Dictionary of Religion and the Arts. That's what brought me to that seminary. I had discussions at that seminary with classmates who did not approve of homosexuality or the lifestyle of gay people, and I'm putting that in parentheses because that was then the preferred term, is gay or lesbian community. Homosexual is not preferred for most of us. Now, many of you know that I'm bisexual, and at the time I was partnered with a woman. So I had many discussions with people who did not accept me, and they were very vocal about it. My saving grace, so to say, was that I was driving to Meadville, Lombard to complete coursework necessary for Unitarian Universalist parts of my training, and I took courses at Starr King in Berkeley, California. And of course, I was surrounded by Unitarian Universalists during my entire journey, so I felt supported. But here's the thing. More than one seminary classmate said to me, quote, "If a person loves another person of the same gender, which is a sin, then what is to stop a person from having sex with a child or an animal?" Of course, I was appalled at the ludicrous statement. And I'm so shocked that in conversations about birds and bees that people don't talk about consent, the role of consent. So I said over and over again, if the consent is not between equals, two persons who are old enough to make sound decisions, it is rape or abuse. Therefore, sex with children and animals, beings who cannot give consent as an equal, it is in fact wrong. However, humans who have intimacy within the domain of shared consent is not wrong. This is what I believe. This is what Unitarian Universalists believe. How did our denomination come to affirm the dignity and worth of human beings, including human orientation, gender expression, and more? I have attached a timeline. If you pick up a copy of the sermon, on the back of it you'll see definitions and you'll see a timeline. It's also on the website, so if you're at home or later on this week, if you want to go in, you can look at the timeline that I posted, as well as a list of definitions. And by the way, the definitions will change over time. So if you go back and want to catch a YouTube version of this sermon, know that in 5 or 10 years, some of what I'm saying will not be accurate for the times. This is where I am and many of us right now. So as we begin to talk further about sexuality, I wanted to give you 3 important points. One is the role of consent that I spoke about. The second pertains to the evolution of our Unitarian Universalist stance on sex and sexuality. So I'm going to take a moment here to highlight a couple of feature milestones. In 1929, the Universalist Church of America passed a resolution in favor of family planning. Think about that. In 1929, Universalists voted to pass a resolution in favor of family planning. In 1947, the American Unitarian Association stood in favor of, quote, the planning of parenthood at their annual meeting. Of course, this is before 1961 when the two denominations merged to form our really long name. In 1993, when the United Church of Christ denomination pursued a sexuality education program, they teamed up with the Unitarian Universalist Association to develop a curriculum. Using the guidelines for comprehensive sexuality education, listen to this, developed by the National Guidelines Task Force, a group of leading health, education, and sexuality professionals, assembled by the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States, the two denominations developed a research-based program that aligned with the values of both. In 1999, Our Whole Lives, or the program known today as OWL, was launched. Very soon, we will hold classes for young people in Our Whole Lives here, OWL. The Our Whole Lives curriculum spans from kindergarten and first grade all the way up to a curriculum for older adults. Can you imagine if some people in leadership realize that we have an Our Whole Life sexuality program for kindergarten and first? How upset that that person might be. Imagine a faith tradition that affirms the total embodiment of the whole person as foundational. Aren't we the lucky ones? Reverence and respect for human nature is at the core of our Unitarian Universalist faith. We believe that all dimensions of personhood carry the potential to do good. We celebrate the gifts of being human, our intelligence, our capacity for observation and reason, our senses, and our ability to appreciate beauty, our creativity, our feelings, and our emotions. We cherish our bodies as well as our souls. We can use our gifts to offer love, to work for justice, to heal injury, to create pleasure for ourselves and others. Unitarian Universalists affirm the inherent worth and dignity of each person as a given in our faith. It is an unshakable conviction calling us to self-respect for ourselves and, of course, respect for others. Which brings me to my third point, which is that if we say we affirm each other, then we need to know that what we say to others is not counter to that affirmation. Stated another way, it means as society shifts, so does our language. You and I should welcome the opportunity to understand what words are insulting and what words or statements express appreciation for one's entire personhood. We need to acquire deeper understanding of how to respond in ways that are welcoming, loving, inclusive, and supportive. And as research on sex and sexuality has provided more information regarding human diversity, it will help to define some major concepts. So let's begin exploring 4 areas that combine to allow an individual to experience wholeness in body, mind, and heart. I have asked Soledad to help me as a volunteer, and I asked Phil Brown to help me. Phil is our model. Soledad is the person who will assist. The first area I want to explore is gender identity. It has to do with who you think you are, who you believe you are, male, female, maybe non-binary, neither or both. Let's consider gender identity on a spectrum, a timeline moving maybe from left, woman, all the way to the right, man. 2 terms you are already familiar with. In the middle, one might not identify as a man or a woman, or it may change over time. Gender identity is all about how you in your head think about yourself. It's about how you internally interpret the chemistry that composes you, your hormone levels, and more. One might ask, do I fit better into the societal role of woman or man, or does neither ring true for me? That is, one might ask, am I somewhere in between the two? Or to ask, does gender fall outside of the spectrum completely? The answer is one's personal gender identity is only understood by that person. It might be binary, male or female, or it might be non-binary, not falling into either. It is commonly understood that we form our gender identities from around 3 years old, and after that age is incredibly difficult to change it. Formation of identity is affected by hormones and environment just as much as it is by biological sex. Often problems arise when someone is assigned a gender at birth based on their sex at birth that doesn't align with how they come to personally identify. We'll talk about that later. Next, we have gender expression. Going back to the idea of a spectrum, on the left may be feminine, on the right masculine, the two expressive terms related to woman and man. In the middle, we have a term formerly known, what we used to know as androgynous, which describes an ambiguous or mixed form of expressing gender. Gender is expression is all about how you demonstrate your gender through the ways you act, dress, behave, and interact, whether that is intentional or unintended. Gender expression is interpreted by others perceiving your gender based on traditional gender roles. Growing up, most of us, men wore pants, women dresses, and now these days, that doesn't hold true. Gender expression is something that changes often from day to day, outfit to outfit, event or setting. It's about how you express yourself and how it aligns or doesn't fit with traditional ways of gendered expression. Like gender identity, there is a lot of room for flexibility here. It is likely that some individuals slide around on this continuum throughout the week without even thinking about it. It's the physical manifestation of one's gender identity, their clothing, hairstyle, voice, gestures. Many transgender individuals seek to match how they look to others to their gender identity rather than anatomical sex assigned at birth. A third is biological sex. It is the physical features one acquired at birth. On the left, we have female again, and on the right, male. The two biological sexes all of us grew up knowing about. In the middle, we have a new term. It's intersex, although, as you'll note from my definitions, intersex is not even commonly used anymore. But maybe some of you recall the old term, hermaphrodite, which we don't use anymore. It's frowned upon, by the way. I have used the phrase sex assigned at birth, meaning it's the assignment and classification of people as male, female, a little of both, based on a combination of anatomy, hormones, and chromosomes. Speaking of chromosomes, listen to this. Chromosomes do not always determine genitalia, sex, or gender. For example, someone can be born with the appearance of being male, but have a functional female reproduction system inside. There are many examples of how intersex can present itself. Here are just 3 statistics. So in 2011, it was the Intersex Society of North America. I don't know what it is today, based on our slippery use of that word, intersex. But the statistics are higher than any one of us perceives because people don't normally discuss this. For example, the total number of people whose bodies differ from standard male or female is 1 in 100 births. Did you know it was that high? 1 in 100 births. Total number of people receiving surgery to normalize genital appearance is 1 or 2 in 1,000 births. And get this, remember your high school biology classes? Girls have 2 X's chromosomes, right? And guys have an X and a Y chromosome. The North American study revealed that actually 1 in 1,666 births occurred whereby the individual has neither 2 X chromosomes or an XY. Did you know this in high school? Thank goodness for science. The last area to consider when we think about the whole natural sexual being is sexual orientation. On the left, we have heterosexual, meaning one is attracted to people of the opposite sex, or one is called straight. On the right, we have homosexual, again, a word that's not commonly used anymore, meaning attracted to people of the same sex or being gay or lesbian. By the way, please drop that word, homosexual. Gay or lesbian is much preferred. And in the middle, we have bisexual, meaning attracted to people of both genders. Note, there is no place on the scale for asexual, which is the lack of sexual attraction, and that is a fact. Sexual orientation is all about who you are physically, spiritually, and emotionally attracted to. For example, if you're male and you're attracted to females, you're straight. If you're a male who is attracted to both females and males, you're bisexual. If you're a male who's attracted to males, you're gay. This is the status quo of which most of us are familiar. Interestingly enough, however, pioneering research, thank you for standing there, sweetheart. Pioneering research conducted by Dr. Alfred Kinsey in the 20th century uncovered that most people aren't absolutely straight or gay or lesbian. You see, instead of just asking, do you like dudes or do you like chicks? Very sciencey. He asked people to report their fantasies, their dreams, their thoughts, their emotional investments in others, and frequency of sexual contact. Based on his findings, he broke sexuality down into a scale of 1 to 5 and reported that most people who identify as straight are actually somewhere between 1 to 3 on this scale, and that people who might identify as gay or lesbian might be 3 to 5 on this scale, meaning there are many people who are right smack dab in the middle, a little bit bi, and there are people like me who fall smack dab in the middle of that scale and born this way. Now, one final note about the 4 categories that I explained: gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, and sexual orientation. They are all independent of each other, meaning a person's sexual orientation does not determine their gender expression. Gender expression isn't determined by gender identity. Gender identity isn't determined by biological sex. Do you hear the word multiplicity and all that I'm saying? And also, every other mismatch of A isn't determined by B or any other combination you can dream up. Those things certainly might affect one another, but they do not determine one another. So the number one thing I want you to come away with this morning is don't make assumptions about others. When someone says, I am gay, or I prefer the pronoun they, please respond with care, more for their comfort than for your discomfort. Don't question the person and say, that's not what I was taught in school. They is a pronoun, it's plural. You can come talk to me about how you feel about that, but when that person is right in front of you, affirm them and use what they're asking you to identify. I want to say thank you to Soledad and to Phil. And Phil, since you were the model, I have a poem for you from the HarperCollins New Revised Standard Edition of the Bible from Song of Solomon. You are beautiful, my love. You are beautiful. Your eyes are doves. You are beautiful, my beloved. So even if it wasn't my partner standing here, I would say that to anybody else who was here volunteering, because we Unitarian Universalists believe and affirm how beautifully we are created. Now, finally, on the idea that some neighbors or people are worthy of loving and others are not, and we know in the transgender community, many individuals have been murdered, and it breaks my heart. But I have to tell you, this started back within the Christian worldview in the half century between 1250 and 300 AD, when the leaders of nations drew exclusionary us versus them thinking. Homosexuality went from fully legal, get this, fully legal in Europe up to 1250, to a death penalty offensive in most countries by 1300. All because so doing was politically useful when conformity was the rule of the day. This comes from a book that's banned in many places called Queer Ducks. If you can get a hold of it, read it. It's very powerful. I celebrate that within Unitarian Universalism, we are all loved for being our whole embodied selves. And if others take issue with our stance, maybe you could quote these words by a fellow Hoosier. Pete Buttigieg, who pretty much summed up how most of us in the queer community feel. If you got a problem with who I am, your problem is not with me. Your quarrel, sir or madam, is with my Creator. And I'll close with a few quotes about love from some of the wise ones. Little Karen, age 7, said, "When you love somebody, your eyelashes go up and down and little stars come out of you." Bobby, age 7, also said, "Love is what's in the room with you at Christmas if you stop opening presents and just listen." And then finally, this one by Smart Billy, age 4. He spoke of love this way: when someone loves you, the way they say your name is different. You know that your name is safe in their mouth. May it be so forever and amen. May it be so.